So imagine this for a second. You and your siblings get some land from your father. The plan, is to build some family homes. But life happens, and it just doesn't work out. So you sell it. Seems like a simple one-time deal, right? Well, fast forward a few years, and you get a letter from the government. Suddenly, they're accusing you of being an illegal corporation, and they're demanding this absolutely crippling amount in taxes. This isn't some made-up story. This is what actually happened to the Obillos siblings, and their fight went all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's get into it.
All right, so our story really kicks off about 5 years after the land was sold. The 4 Obillos siblings, that's Jose Jr., Sarah, Romeo, and Remedios, get this deficiency tax assessment in the mail, and it must have just felt like a total punch to the gut. The Commissioner of Internal Revenue was demanding they cough up this much, specifically for corporate income tax.
And that's the part that's so wild. This wasn't some big registered company. This was a corporate tax bill, and it was sent to 4 regular people for doing one single transaction with their own family property.
So that really brings us to the core question here, the mystery of this whole case. How on earth could the government look at 4 siblings selling 2 pieces of land and somehow see an unregistered partnership that should be taxed like a corporation? And to really get how serious this was, you just have to look at the numbers.
Okay, this is where the situation just gets staggering. See, the siblings had already paid their individual capital gains tax on the sale, but the commissioner wasn't just asking for corporate tax. Nope. They also reassessed their personal taxes and then slapped on a 50% fraud surcharge plus interest. The grand total they were demanding was over 127,000 pesos on a profit of just over 134,000. It was, as the court itself would later say, an act of oppressive taxation.
To really see how the court picked this all apart, we've got to go back to the beginning, to the facts of the case. And what the facts show is a very, very simple family deal.
The timeline really shows you how straightforward this was all supposed to be. On March 2, 1973, the father, Jose Obillos Sr., finishes paying for 2 lots. The very next day, he transfers his rights to his 4 kids. And the reason? It was clearly stated, for them to build their family homes. 10 days later, the sale is official. But then in 1974, they realize, hey, building here is way too expensive. So they sell the lots. It's just a single, isolated sale. Then, nothing. Silence for almost 6 years until, get this, one day before the 5-year deadline to assess taxes was up, the bill arrives.
So you're probably wondering, what was the government's legal argument here? How did they possibly justify treating a family like a corporation? Well, they argued that the siblings had, in effect, accidentally formed a partnership.
The government's entire case really rested on this one legal idea, the unregistered partnership. You see, under the tax code, if a couple of people team up for some kind of venture to make a profit, even if they don't have a formal contract, the law can decide to treat that group like a corporation for tax purposes.
The commissioner's logic was pretty straightforward, at least from their perspective. The siblings put in money to buy the lots, they sold those lots for more than they paid, and then they split the profit. So in the government's view, that sequence of events automatically created a taxable joint venture. But was it really that simple?
The whole case, and I mean the entire thing, really came down to one critical legal distinction. It's a difference the Supreme Court would later spell out very clearly, the difference between just being co-owners and being actual business partners. And the difference between these two things is absolutely everything. Let me put it this way. Co-ownership is kind of like you and your cousins inheriting an old house. Your main goal is just to keep it up. If you eventually sell it, the profit you make is just a side effect of getting rid of the shared property. A partnership, though, that's like you and your cousins pooling your money to buy a house specifically to flip it. From day one, the main goal, the whole point, is to make a profit.
So, keeping that distinction in mind, the case finally makes its way to the Supreme Court. On one side, you have the siblings saying, hey, we were just co-owners getting rid of a shared asset. On the other, the government is insisting, nope, you are partners in a business deal. The court had to make the final call.
And when it came down to it, the court's whole decision rested on one single incredibly powerful idea: intent. What did the parties intend to do from the very beginning? That was the most important factor.
The court actually used the original Spanish legal terms to frame its decision. It asked, what was the finalidad, the ultimate purpose? Was it lucro común partible, a common divisible profit, which is the heart of a partnership? Or was it mera conservation, which means mere conservation in use, the classic sign of a simple co-ownership? So when we break down the court's ratio decidendi, the legal reasoning behind its decision, we see this really clear chain of logic.
First, the original intent, which was actually documented by their father, was to build homes, not to flip property. Second, they didn't do anything with the land, no developing it, no business activities whatsoever. Third, the sale was just the simplest way to end the co-ownership when they realized they couldn't afford to build. That means the profit was just incidental. And most importantly, there was no unmistakable intention to create a business, which the law says you need to have. They were co-owners, period. And so, the assessments were canceled.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why is this case from decades ago still so important today? Well, it sets down a really clear and vital legal doctrine.
The main principle that came out of this is both simple and profound. The court made it clear that just because you co-own something that happens to make money, you are not automatically a partnership. To be taxed like a corporation, there has to be a clear, undeniable intent to come together for the main purpose of running a business for profit.
And really, this case is a huge reminder for anyone who owns property with family or with friends. The law looks deeper than just the sale itself. It looks at your original purpose, your finalidad. So the lesson here is pretty clear. It's not just about the profit you might make, it's about why you got together in the first place. Your intent, that's everything.